The diner went silent the moment the coffee hit the floor, not by accident, but by choice. A sheriff's deputy tilted his cup slowly, watching the dark liquid spread toward the paws of a perfectly trained German shepherd, as if daring the quiet man in camouflage to react. No one inside that room realized it yet, but they were about to witness the kind of restraint that only comes from surviving things far worse than humiliation. I share news stories here every day, and I would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now, let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you love it if you keep listening till the end. And tell me from which part of the world you are watching this story. I am interested to know how far away this story traveled. The first drop of coffee landed with a sharp splash, echoing louder than the clatter of plates or the lazy hum of the old ceiling fans. Conversations died instantly. Forks paused mid-air. Eyes shifted toward the booth near the window, where a German shepherd sat perfectly still, her posture flawless, her eyes calm and alert. The deputy hadn't spilled the coffee by mistake. He'd done it on purpose, smiling as the mess crept closer to the dog's paws. The man in the booth didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice or move abruptly. One hand rested lightly on the table. The other stayed close to the dog's collar knot, gripping, just present. It was the kind of touch that held back more than an animal. It held back years of discipline, etched into muscle and bone. The dog, Luna, sensed the tension immediately. Her ears twitched as the smell of hot coffee mixed with arrogance and fear. Still, she didn't move an inch. Her gaze stayed locked on her handler's face, trusting him completely. She had been trained to read the smallest details: his breathing, his posture, the subtle shifts in energy. And right now, he was steady. Unshaken. "You heard me," the deputy said loudly. His voice meant for the entire diner. "Clean it up. And make it quick." Another officer laughed behind him. Nudging his partner like this was cheap entertainment on a slow shift. A few customers looked down at menus they weren't really reading. The waitress froze behind the counter, hands shaking around a coffee pot, eyes darting between badges and the quiet man in camouflage. Something about him didn't fit. He sat straight despite the insult, his gaze calm but sharp, like a blade still in its sheath. Slowly, deliberately, the man looked down at the spreading mess, then back up at the deputy. For a brief moment, his eyes changed not with anger, but with recognition. The kind that comes from having seen this behavior before, in places far darker than a roadside diner. "You done?" he asked quietly. The lack of emotion made it worse. Bullies crave reaction, not restraint. The deputy scoffed and leaned closer, his badge nearly brushing the man's chest. That was when he really noticed the dog. Not just a pet, but the coiled muscle, the controlled breathing, the eyes tracking every movement without aggression or fear. "Nice dog," the deputy said, nudging the cup with his boot, pushing the mess closer. "Shame if she got trained to bite the wrong person." The man stood then slowly, carefully so no one could accuse him of aggression. As he rose to his full height, the room felt smaller, tighter. Even the laughing officer behind the deputy stopped smiling. Something in the air had shifted. Something old, patient, dangerous. The man reached into his pocket. Not fast, not sudden, and pulled out a worn set of dog tags. They dangled loosely in his hand, catching the light as he looked the deputy straight in the eye. "You might want to rethink how you're starting this day," he said calmly. No one knew it yet, but the mistake had already been made. This wasn't about coffee, or a dog, or wounded pride. The deputies had chosen the wrong stranger. The quiet man standing there had survived things they only pretended to be brave enough to face. And he had learned long ago that patience could be far more dangerous than rage. The dog tags glinted for only a second, but it was enough to change something in the deputy's expression. Not understanding, just unease. Confidence like that didn't come from bravado. It came from experience. "You think that scares me?" the deputy said, forcing a laugh that didn't land. Luna hadn't moved. She hadn't growled or shifted her weight. She remained carved from discipline. "I came here to eat," the man said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard, same as everyone else. "I didn't come looking for trouble." "Funny," the deputy replied, crossing his arms. "Because trouble seems to follow dogs like that." The man nodded slowly. "Yeah, sometimes it does. Mostly when people don't know when to stop." That was when the elderly cook cleared his throat from behind the counter. His voice trembled, but it held. "Son, maybe you should just leave him be." Before the deputy could respond, the diner door opened. A tall man in a pressed uniform stepped inside, his presence immediate and commanding. The room went quiet again as his eyes locked onto the scene. "Sheriff," one of the officers muttered. The sheriff took in the spilled coffee, the rigid deputies, the man in camouflage, and finally the German shepherd. "What's going on here?" he asked. The man stood once more, turning slightly so the sheriff could see the patch on his sleeve, the insignia he'd never hidden because he'd never needed to. "No trouble," he said. "Just having breakfast?" Sheriff's eyes narrowed. Recognition flickered. His tone changed instantly. "Sir, may I see some ID?" The man handed it over. As the sheriff read, the color drained from his face. He handed it back with both hands. "My apologies," the sheriff said firmly. Then he turned to his deputies. "All of you, outside." Now, no one argued. Chairs scraped. Confidence dissolved into silence. The man sat back down, exhaling at last. Luna leaned gently against his leg, and he rested his hand on her head. The waitress returned with a fresh cup of coffee. "On the house," she said softly. He nodded once in thanks. As the diner returned to life, no one forgot what they'd witnessed. Power meant nothing without restraint. And the most dangerous people in the room were often the ones who never announced who they were. Thanks for watching till end. Please like and subscribe my channel. I will be very thankful to you.